Hello and welcome to the Law Podcast, brought to you by the University of Stirling Law Society. I am your host, Jedd. Today I am joined by George Henry, partner at Sinclairs Criminal Defence Lawyers. George discusses his experiences working in the legal industry and offers advice to aspiring criminal law solicitors. So hello everyone, welcome back to the show. Hope everyone is doing well. I hope we're all enjoying a good start to 2021. Today is actually a very big moment for myself and the show in general, as I'm actually joined for the first time by someone who's not a current student at the university. So it's a very special day. I'm really looking forward to it. And today I'm delighted to be joined by none other than Mr. George Henry, who is a partner at Sinclairs Criminal Defence Lawyers in Edinburgh. So first of all, George, how are you doing? How's your start to 2021 going so far?
Hi, Jedd. Thanks very much, first of all, for asking me to come on this. I'm pleased to be here. Yeah, 2021 so far has been, like everyone else's 2021, a bit of a scunner fest, to be honest, in general terms, in terms of lockdown. In terms of what I do as a job, the courts have gone back to operating on a part-time basis, if you like. So the job is very much stop-start. But like everyone else, we just have to get on with it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure people can empathise with that. I'm sure everyone's roughly in the same boat, and it can't be easy trying to do court work at the minute with it being so, like you say, part-time. So yeah, credit to you for putting up with that. I would like to just start off by going back to the start of your career and when you're going to university. I just want to kind of give people an idea as to what inspired you to go into criminal defence in the first place.
Okay, well, any moments of inspiration didn't occur until pretty much after I was finished my university degree, I would think. Probably in terms of doing criminal law, I was relatively bright at school. I got results at my Highers which would have allowed me to do law, and I had no real inclination to do it, to be quite frank, but my dad suggested I should do it. My preference would have been to do English or history. And I just kind of fell into it, and having been brought up in and around Edinburgh, I ended up going to Aberdeen University. So I had a great time at university. I was frankly a relatively mediocre student at degree level. I then finished, got a 2-2 somehow, and then spent a couple of years doing other things, not really sure where I was going. I ended up in a job in the civil service in Edinburgh. I realised that ultimately that wasn't for me, and decided over a very short period of time to go back to do the diploma. I went to Strathclyde, and that's when my engagement with a legal career really started, because Strathclyde for me at the time was a great place to be. Unlike Aberdeen, Strathclyde very much had one foot in the outside world. They had very strong connections with the local profession. The practical aspects of the diploma seemed to suit me, and I was a successful student there in a way that I hadn't been at all at Aberdeen. And I managed to get a good traineeship with Ross Harper and Murphy, who at that time were a very big firm operating in the west of Scotland. And when I started doing that, I realised that of the three elements to the traineeship, which were court work, wills, trusts and executories, and conveyancing, by far and away, I was drawn most clearly to court work, and within that, drawn most clearly to criminal defence work. And that's when I began really to take an interest in it. And I think that's because I appreciated the real impact that the criminal law and the whole criminal justice system can have on people's lives. And I found it exciting, interesting, rewarding, partly or very much because it's people-based. You're seeing people in extreme circumstances, and you see people from all walks of life. So I'm a people person. I'm not an academically minded person particularly. So that really suited me. And I've done reasonably well at it. It does suit me. And I'd like to think I've got a bit of an aptitude for it. And it's just carried on from there.
Yeah, and I mean, for anyone who wasn't at our legal aid conference, which we had a couple of weeks ago, George was very kind and came along and spoke, and was one of the speakers who really stood out for myself. And I think it was because, like you said, George, I felt your passion for your job, and you could see that, you know, you focused a lot on the fact that it's a people focused job, it's a people person's job, and if you enjoy dealing with people and a wide variety of different people, then it really is the job for you. And then I know we got into a bit of a discussion later on in the breakout room, which was great. And Yeah, and it just, like I say, it really does just come across how passionate you are for your job, and I think that's a very key element to being a criminal defence solicitor in the first place. So, my line of question for the interview today is, I'm trying to give an insight for those who are potentially thinking of going into criminal defence or have an interest in it, or are just trying to kind of get a bit of an insight into to what life is like. So, what does a typical day look like for you, George? I know it'll vary a lot depending on court work and different client meetings and stuff. So, and it obviously vary a lot right now because of COVID. I'm sure it's very different in the past year to what it was in previous years. But is there any sort of tasks that you do more than most, and what does a kind of general day look like for you?
Yeah, well, an average day involves going to court. That's Monday to Friday. The courts don't sit at the weekends yet, although the Lord Justice General is talking about Saturday courts, which, needless to say, will not be popular with us. So
Yeah.
Monday to Friday, Monday to Friday, we go to court every day, basically. We keep a paper diary system, and depending on what it is, it may be relatively straightforward procedural hearings. It may be hearings where we are tendering pleas in mitigation. It may be a trial, an ordinary summary trial. It may be a sheriff and jury trial. Occasionally, we're sitting behind counsel in the High Court, perhaps in Glasgow. Most of the court appearances that we do are in Edinburgh, although we do travel quite widely. And I think in my time as a criminal defence lawyer, I've appeared in more than 30 different sheriff courts across Scotland. So there's variety in the job. Pre-COVID, we would be going to the prisons to visit clients who are in custody. Post-COVID, and I think this will be the way it's going to be by and large in the future, it's done remotely, but by video link, that's something that we didn't really do. We much prefer to sit opposite the clients face to face, but that's the coming thing. So there's that. Clients will come into the office. We have many clients of long standing who have never been in our office. We will never see them in a police station or at court. We do go to police stations if someone is arrested and wants to speak to us. Again, that is now being done. Those consultations are being done remotely. And that, again, is something that I think is going to develop. Out with what you might call normal office working hours, we did, in years gone by, go to police stations much more often than we do now. For various reasons, we don't do it as much. But we're essentially on call 7 days a week. I'm in a two-partner business, so we just split it up on an equitable basis between the two of us. So every day is different. Every day's court, or 95% of the days are court. There is preparation. The balance in a criminal practice is more weighted towards actual court work rather than preparation, whereas perhaps in a civil court practice, it's much more weighted towards preparation rather than court work. And that's one of the reasons this side of the job seems to suit me, because I don't have the aptitude for painstaking, detailed preparation, whereas I relish the court environment and the adrenaline rush, if you like, that you get from doing that. The stress that's attached to that is something that I think many criminal defence lawyers need to get their act together, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. I think, like you say, court work is obviously it's a big thing for a criminal defence solicitor, and anyone who's listening who's thinking about potentially going into criminal defence, obviously don't have a picture in your head that you're going to spend 9 to 5 Monday to Friday in the office. Like George says, you're going to be very much in and out of the courts all week, and I think that's obviously a big factor for people who are considering going into criminal defence, and it's obviously a big benefit of it if that's the kind of thing that you enjoy. So, just moving on, George, I would just like to ask you, it's quite a vague question, and you can answer it however you like, but is there a particular factor to your job, whether it be in work's gone by or where you are right now, is there anything that stands out for you as your favourite part of the job?
My favourite part of the job is appearing in court. I like the theatre of it. I like the edginess of it. The fact that you have to be completely focused. I mean, in recent years, there's been the word mindfulness has come to the fore in terms of mental health and therapies along those lines. I think being a court practitioner, you're experiencing mindfulness every day, because when you are doing a court appearance, you are completely focused on that to the exclusion of everything else. So if that's what mindfulness means, emptying your head of all other thoughts and just focusing on the present, then in a sense, being a court practitioner is quite a therapeutic thing. And so that's the thing I most enjoy about the job. It's completely absorbing, I think, when you're doing it, when you're in the moment, when you're cross-examining a witness. That is what your whole life is for that period of time. You don't have time to think about anything else. So I think that's the aspect of the job I most enjoy.
Yeah, I was kind of anticipating that would be your answer, and I hope that kind of give people an insight into what they can look forward to if they do indeed go on to work in the kind of criminal defence side of things in their legal career. So just on the back of that, I suppose it would be pretty silly of me not to ask, I don't want to say the worst part of the job, I think that's quite a cynical outlook. Is there anything that you put up with on a regular basis which is quite a difficult part of the job?
The thing I find most annoying about the job is the bureaucracy, and that's increased greatly. The single most annoying aspect of the job is that we have to deal with the Scottish Legal Aid Board. 90% of what we do is legal aided, and the framework that they have now developed is almost unbelievably complicated and bureaucratic. And they're an incredibly frustrating organisation with which to have day in, day out dealings. So that's the biggest frustration is the bureaucracy and the extent to which that's increased over the years. Far too much of my time is spent dealing with legal aid matters, which really should be much, much more straightforward. Fundamentally, legal aid board's function is to provide legal representation for people who would otherwise not be able to obtain it, but they seem to have gone way away from that basic purpose and have built this gargantuan bureaucratic edifice, which is far too unwieldy and cumbersome, and the whole thing needs to be reviewed, and it hasn't been really, not properly anyway. So that's the biggest frustration, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that was something that you touched on in your presentation at the Legal Aid conference, which I mentioned earlier, and it definitely sounds like it's something that must be really frustrating to put up with, especially like you say when you're dealing with it 90% of the time. If it's not a very good system, then obviously it's going to have a massive impact on your job. So yes, moving on. Obviously, within the kind of confidentiality limits, of course, are there any particular stories or cases that really stick out in your mind that you think would be of interest to people listening?
Yeah, there are. It's a very open question. I could be here for the rest of the day and the rest of the week telling you court stories. I suppose the ones that immediately come to mind, perhaps most relevant to what this podcast is about, are the ones where, as a defence agent, you are representing people who are facing serious charges, and you know that they really should not be convicted simply because they are, in fact, innocent of the charges. That's the most extreme example. The most extreme cases, without wishing to be here all day, I had a case where a guy with no previous convictions at all had been set up, not by the police, but by criminals, organised career criminals, in the sense that his flat, his bedsit, had been used out with his knowledge as a safe house, essentially, for large quantities of drugs. And the authorities became aware of the fact that a large quantity of drugs were being held on his property. And he, by that stage, was the sole occupant of the property. And the notion that applies in that situation is that if you are the sole occupant of the property, then you're deemed to know what's in your property and be responsible for it. That's put short. But he had no idea what was going on at all, none whatsoever, and was at a complete loss when I'm talking about kilos of drugs were recovered. And so was I, to be honest with you. Not that I doubted what he was telling me, but I just couldn't understand how this had arisen. What then happened was that there was then a a siege at gunpoint in the building. And on the back of this, it became clear that within the building, a well-known Edinburgh criminal had been living and had a standoff with the police, as I say, at gunpoint. And I had gone out. He was then remanded in custody, and I had gone out to speak to him at Edinburgh prison and sat him down and explained where I was coming from and said to him, I don't know that there's a connection between what happened allegedly in relation to the gunpoint siege and what has happened to my client, but I can't help thinking that there might be. Do you know anything about this, and are you prepared to speak to me about this? And what he said to me was that he wanted to think about it and I should come back. So I did. I went back out to the jail 2 days later, no idea what I was going to be met with. And then he told me the truth of what had happened, which is that he and his friends had realised that they could gain access to my client's property and realised that he was a complete straight peg, a very straightforward person with no criminal record whatsoever, who kept regular hours, worked 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and that they thought that would be a very safe place to keep drugs because no one would suspect that he was involved in this at all. And they had used that as a safe house. Now, for all sorts of reasons that we don't need to go into just now, I couldn't use him as a witness. Primarily, one of the biggest factors was that if he was used as a witness, the Crown would be able to bring out his criminal record, and all the jury might remember about it was that the star defence witness was a man with a very, very serious criminal record. So the only way to play it was to keep him out of the equation and then go to the jury with it. And it was very, very stressful because there was a sufficiency of evidence, and he was acquitted. His boss was there, the manager director of the company he worked for was there. Some of his relatives were there, friends were there. The public benches at the end of this were full of people in tears of relief. And about a week later, the sheriff who had presided over the trial came up to me in a coffee shop near a cafe near the court in Edinburgh. I didn't know the sheriff on a personal level at all at that stage. And he signalled me to come across and speak to him. And I was slightly awkward about that, the way it is out of court context. Anyway, he came across and said to me, you'll never have another case like that in your career, he said. And he said to me, the sheriff, he said, it couldn't possibly have been him, could it? Meaning my client. And I said, no, it couldn't have been. And he was apologetic about the fact that the sheriff had rejected my submission of no case to answer, which was rubbish. But I did it in the hope that he might just go with it because he must have known that the client was innocent. So that is an extreme example of a situation where legally the process worked as it should have, in the sense that there was a sufficiency of evidence, but in a rough and ready moral way, it should never have got anywhere near there. But the Crown prosecution felt under obligation to go. So that was a high stakes case where unusually it involved, as I say, a completely innocent person being set up. So that's an example of this sort of thing. It's not the only example I could give you, but I hope that helps, Jedd, if that's relevant at all, to perhaps set the scene.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of story you don't really kind of imagine would happen here in Scotland in real life. It's something that you see happen on TV or in films, and to find out that actually happens is crazy. And it was really interesting just listening to you speak there, George. So just leading on.
Sorry, Jedd, can I just interrupt you? Sorry, just quickly there. I should have put in the story another aspect to that. I should have put in, when I went back out to see the guy, the career criminal who'd been involved in the gunshot standoff with the police, I said to him, why are you doing this? Why are you telling me this? Because I was suspicious about it. And he said to me, the exact words he said to me were, he said, in the world I inhabit, things happen, but this should not be happening. In other words, he recognised how unfair it was. And that was really telling, I thought, that he felt that even in his world, that wasn't on at all. So there you go. Sorry, I meant to put that in this.
For a career criminal, like you say, to come out with that shows you the magnitude of the situation. And I was just gonna ask there, in that sort of situation, how do you handle the pressure? Because, like you say, you have a completely innocent, normal person, like you say, normal 9-to-5 job, never been involved with any kind of confrontation with the law before, and you have his life and his family's life in your hands to get him off this charge. How do you handle that pressure?
It can be very difficult, to be honest with you. I think you have to be able, one has to be able to compartmentalise things. And that's something that I'm relatively good at. I'm not great at it, but I'm relatively good at it. And I think you almost have to have that. You almost have to have that inbuilt shield, if you like. Otherwise, you would really struggle to cope with the stress of it all. I think you've got to be able to walk away from it in your head, and I suppose just trust that you're doing everything you possibly can, and trust in the system. Because by and large, most of the time, the system pretty much gets it right, in my experience. Not always, but pretty much. And just trust that jurors, by and large, get it right. I suppose that's a key element in this. The jury system is much maligned, but juries, in my experience, generally speaking, get it right. But there's no doubt about it. There is pressure, and you do carry the stress. In a case like that, you do really carry the stress of a situation like that. So you've got to be prepared to do that.
Yeah, yes. I suppose it just comes back to trying to take the emotion out of the situation.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you've got a job to do, and if you just break it down, like you say, focus on the facts, and like you say as well, have trust in the system, because in a situation like that, you would like to hope that the legal system is going to come to the right conclusion and the innocent party is going to get off with what sounds like a ridiculous situation to find themselves in. So I hope that was a really interesting story for everyone to listen to. It was certainly interesting for me here, just talking to you about it, George. So thank you for sharing that. So just more onto the kind of the student side of things. Like I say, I do want to try and ask you questions that will help people who are currently studying the LLB and are looking to go into criminal defence work. Is there any, I know this is quite a vague question, so take it in any direction that you wish, George. Is there any kind of key advice that you would give to someone who is considering going into criminal defence?
Yeah, I think the best advice I can say is that if you're committed to doing it, make contact with firms, make contact with the Procurator Fiscal, COPFS, Crown Office Procurator Fiscal Service, and see if you can get a foot in the door in terms of work experience, in terms of even doing, typing IT stuff for criminal firms. Be prepared to do something for nothing, which isn't ideal, obviously. However, just get yourself in there and be able to show that you're actually are really interested in it. That's the one thing I would say. It's really difficult just now because of the legal aid situation. Traineeships are very, very thin on the ground. At the moment, there is the possibility that the Scottish Government, will give grants to firms to support traineeships. That decision is due out in the next week or 2 weeks, I think. And the proposition is that they'll give support to firms in relation to maybe 40 traineeships altogether. Now, not all of those will be in criminal defence, but some of them will be. In many ways, the best traineeship you can get, one of the best, would be with the Crown Office. If you get a Crown Office traineeship, then that would be an extremely good one to get. Again, it's very, very competitive. But I would say to anyone who is genuinely interested and genuinely has a passion for it, do not be shy and put yourself forward there. What has tended to happen to some extent is that some people over the years have put themselves forward and have been quite assertive about putting themselves forward. But as time passes, you come to recognise, looking at younger people coming through, that sometimes they aren't the best equipped for the job. And the ones that turn out to be best equipped have not had the confidence or the confidence to put themselves forward in that sort of way.
The other thing that students might want to think about is going down to courts and just experiencing a day at the court. Now, you can do that by contacting solicitors, who are often quite happy to have people at court following them about or being pointed in the direction of particularly interesting cases, or you can just go as a member of the public. Now, obviously, this is all up in the air just now because of COVID, but assuming that we eventually get out of lockdown and go back to normal service, as it were, that can be a very rewarding thing to do, I think, and I think you can get a real feel for what's going on. The other thing you might want to think about is contacting the Faculty of Advocates. So there are two branches of the legal profession, solicitors and faculty of advocates, and I think if you do contact them, they may be quite receptive to people going in for work experience episodes or whatever. That may be something worth exploring. I don't really know what the response would be, but I suspect they might be quite receptive to it.
Yeah, that I would actually encourage that, because it's something that I've done myself before. I managed to get myself down to the High Court, obviously before the whole Corona situation. I managed to get myself down there shadowing a QC during a culpable homicide charge trial, and it was very interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't get the full kind of theatrical experience because different factors played a part, and basically the whole thing got adjourned to another day, and I couldn't go back because of exams and stuff. So definitely get in touch, like George says, that you get, even just going down to the Sheriff Court is something I've done before. And just on your point there, George, about contacting solicitors who are in the Sheriff Court, whenever I've been down there, obviously I went down as part of the public, and you sit there and you feel like you're very much standing out, like, who's this random person that's just come along to sit and watch this. And obviously I've wanted to approach solicitors before and kind of felt like, are they going to be very receptive? Are they going to think I'm a bit strange for just randomly approaching them? And would you encourage that? And do you think that most solicitors will react well in that situation and give good advice should you approach them in the Sheriff Court?
Yes, I think that's probably right. It's like every walk of life. Some people will be less friendly than others, but by and large, I think people would be quite welcoming if approached by a student in that situation. So speaking for myself, for example, if it didn't suit me to have them watch what I was doing for whatever reason, then I would try to point in the direction of something I think they might be interested in. I would think that on any given day at the court, there's always something going on that is of interest, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, George, and thank you very much for giving us the insights on that, and I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us. Now, I know it's getting a bit late, and you're obviously a very busy man, so I don't want to keep you too long. We've kind of had you here for 25 minutes now, so I think that's a good place to wrap up. So again, George, just want to thank you for your time. I really do appreciate you coming on and taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak to us, and I hope this will be of use to many students out there. So yeah, George, thank you very much for coming on, and hopefully we'll get to speak to you again soon.
Right, Jedd, thanks very much for inviting me, and I've enjoyed it, and I'd just like to wish everyone all the very best. And if you have a passion for criminal law, follow it. As I often say, if you find a job that you love, you never work a day in your life, so maybe bear that in mind.
Thank you very much for listening to another episode of our podcast. If you like what you hear, please follow us on your podcast platform of choice to ensure that you never miss an upload. To keep up to date with us, you can follow our Instagram page, which is Stir Law Society. Additionally, our Twitter is @_Stir Law Society. In the meantime, it's goodbye from me, and I'll speak to you again very soon.